would love to help Missouri become even. The ladybug fauna in Missouri is among the best known in the world, and that's pretty astounding when I show you the holes and all the stuff we don't know. So, you know, if you all are willing to send stuff to Lost Ladybug, it would be really fun to fill in some of the holes the state has. And the Lost Ladybug Project was formed because there was a bunch of school kids in New York, and you know, school kids, they petitioned the government, the state government of New York, to designate a state insect, and they thought that a really good state insect would be the ladybug. Because who doesn't like ladybugs? They're cute, they're industrious, you know, gardeners like them. And so they chose Cocinella novum notata, the 9-spotted ladybug. And one of the state senators was even smart enough to realize there's more than one type of ladybug. And so he actually contacted the entomologists at Cornell so that they would get a good ladybug for the state of New York. And of course, then when the school kids wanted to see one, they couldn't find it. And that's how the Lost Ladybug started. So the Lost Ladybug considered the establishment of non-native ladybugs to be a contributing factor, or maybe the main factor in the decline of the 9-spotted ladybug from northeastern North America. And there's been quite a few scientific papers that have borne that out, or have discussed that. But in 2000, and just so you know, this is Cocinella septempunctata, or the 7-spot ladybug, which is one of the non-native invasive ladybugs. This guy is Hippodomia convergens, a native ladybug, and relatively common in the state of Missouri. There'll be more on that later. But in 2009, we had this really bad ice storm in the Boot Hill. I work as a botanist sometimes, and I had a dissecting scope with a LED battery-powered stage. And so even though we didn't have electricity for a very long period of time, I was able to identify some specimens that had been sitting in a collection at the Delta Research Center where I happened to work. And this was an agricultural collection. And of course, this is located in Portageville, Missouri, in between New Madrid and Pemiscot County. And so we found that, you know, the ladybug collection there started in 1966. And then by 1970, 4 species were no longer being found. And one of them being the 2-spotted ladybug, Adalia bipuncta, and one of them being the 9-spotted ladybug, which is the one that started the Lost Ladybug Project, or C9, or 9-spot. So that was really interesting. Now, if you believe that non-natives are what contributed to that, it's really hard to say that these two non-natives, the 7-spot ladybug, with the first capture in 1995, or 25 years after the species started dropping out, or Harmonia, which is the Asian multicolored ladybug with a first capture in 2002, that either of those could have had a large impact on what happened in 1970. And by the time we were looking at them, by 2007, 2008, the Boot Hill ladybug fauna was 70% non-native species, primarily, well, entirely, the Asian multicolor and the 7-spot ladybug. There were a lot of things that confused me about this. We wrote a paper about it, and the paper caused some controversy, like a good paper should. The other thing we found was that while we were doing this, we found some 7-spots that had these really odd humoral markings that you see that I'm circling. And it makes their shells look more like 9-spot ladybug shells, or elytra. if you wish to use the correct technique. And then here on the pronotum, it's still a 7-spot pronotum. This part right here would be white on a 9-spot. So we had these really odd 9 spots, and we still don't know what's going on. This is not the same ideology as these. It doesn't come from the same place. And we don't know if it's some sort of, it's just interesting that it shows up in North American populations that are replacing a 9-spotted species in the same genus. So that was kind of interesting. And then the more we looked, the more we found that spots can be really variable. It was an interesting, that was an interesting paper. We brought in Louis Hessler out of South Dakota. It was a lot of fun, and again, we're learning more about Missouri ladybugs. So then the next year, now I have labeled data from the ENS Museum, Delta Research Center, Southeast Missouri State, and some private collections from around the state. And this was really exciting because now we were making maps, and additionally, we pulled in photographs from the Lost Ladybug Project, and we used their collection as a digital collection, which is really cool. So when you're looking at these citizen science projects, here we have a collection that requires very little effort to maintain. You know, I mean, it just maintains digital. Oh, sorry. And then, of course, this is Coleomegula, and here's the pupa, and here's the larvae. But so we did that. We used the Lost Ladybug photos, and then we mapped 21 species of ladybug, and then we also mapped 2 species of Appalachia, mainly because I like Appalachia. They're really cute. They're a very large ladybug, so just kind of fun to look at. And I guess it's my mapping project, so I can do that. But so when we come to the Lost Ladybugs, you can see over here, I'm sorry. So you can see over here, we have no specimens, present before 1990, present only after 1990, and present pre and post 1990. And Adalia bipuncta, Boone County, because of the university, gets sampled every year by the student insect collector, or every other year by student entomology collection. And so they have this really cool database that dates back. But it doesn't really, once you get outside of Boone County, it doesn't show much. And so all of this white is just unsampled. We just don't know. And so that's kind of fun. And you'll see later on that even with, there's some really common species that we just have huge gaps in what we know in the state of Missouri. And remember, Missouri has a lot more ladybug information available for the state than most of the U.S., if not all of the U.S. And so, you know, present after 1990, but not present after 2000. So, you know, finding Adalia bipuncta, or the 2-spotted ladybug, would be a really big deal. Finding the 9-spotted ladybug would be a big deal in the state of Missouri. So here's our introduced species, the Asian multicolor and the 7-spot. And you can see in 1986, Ben Putler and Wayne Bailey, they went around the state and they documented all of these, all of the blue and the yellow. And that was day 0 for this species. And then it didn't show up in the Boot Hill until 1995. If we don't call Scott County the Boot Hill. But that's kind of interesting, given that by the time we were looking down here, again, 60 to 70% or more. I mean, it's crazy how much of your ladybug fauna is these two species down in the Missouri Ladybugs. Um, so with that being said, I mean, these species quickly dominate. They're very large uh, for a ladybug. Um, both are wide ranging in what they can eat. So, you know, if one food source isn't available, they can swap over to something else. Um, they're very robust animals. They're really good competitors. However, that large size also means that a little ladybug like Cycloneta munda, which I can't tell you a common name for, but it's a third the size, and so it can fit places that these can't. Um, but it is just very interesting to see how these two species came to dominate, at least southeast Missouri. And then this is Hippodamia convergens. And what you can see is if you look at this map, it doesn't look like it's very common. That isn't, uh, that I don't think that's the case. What I think is that we're just not doing the sampling. And especially when you think that we have up in this area, you know, in northwest Missouri, we have those really amazing remnant prairies. Um, any place you around a lot of legumes in those prairies, um, that would be a really good bet if you were going to find the nine-spotted ladybug in the state of Missouri. And we'll we'll cover a little bit more um, about nine-spotted ladybugs and rarity and all of that in just a bit. But so sampling in the, you know, when you're dealing with this sort of data, there wasn't a sampling plan. So the sampling's uneven. You know, there's always those really good samples from Boone. Um, and then of course, counties are useful. They allow you to make this map, but counties aren't biogeographically important. Um, so I have all these maps, and again, just ask me and I'll email you the whole set. It was a fun project to do. We never really published it, but it was a lot of fun. I'll probably go through and update it with the current Lost Ladybug project data and see how much these have changed. So then we come to 2016, and Lauren Diepenbrock, who's a good friend of ours, she was a graduate student at University of Missouri in Columbia, and so she had some really bad luck in the field, and so she, you know, it's like, here's, you know, 5,500 ladybug occurrence data points. Have fun. And so Lauren ran a whole bunch of statistics and did a much better job with the data than anyone could have, I think. And so based on collection data, um, she's saying that these species may no longer be present in Missouri. But one of the things she found was that the ladybug fauna has been changing gradually for the past century. And reflecting what we were finding back in 2009, that exotic species may be an influence, but they're not the major factor in what's changing in species composition. And then Lauren picked up on increasing urbanization. In the 2009 paper, we looked at satellite maps trying to figure out what was going on. And what we came up with was intensification of agriculture may have been the issue. But changes in land use have definitely occurred in the last century, and they may be part of the problem. By the way, this guy is a light form of Olivia nigrum. And this ladybug's interesting because normally you'll see it and it's black with 2 red spots. But you'll see these guys too. And they're pretty common. Again, they really like leguminous trees. And so in southeast Missouri, um, anytime you find, um, oh gosh, what is it? Mimosa? That the the big pink tree in the Missouri Blue Hill that's in the feathers. These guys love it. You find a couple of those trees and you'll find these guys in it.
Kent, which one did you say that was?
This is Olivia nigrum.
Okay.
And again, I guess that's the one downside is like if you do butterflies, somebody's come up with a common name for every butterfly. There's a lot that you can go, oh, it's a little brown skipper. But with ladybugs, I mean, they're all fascinating and they're all just amazing insects. And you're going to have to learn some Latin. It doesn't.
I think I can handle it.
Yeah, you know, your tongue doesn't fall off after so much. But so this was really cool. And it was neat that Lauren was able to take this statewide look. And, you know, so now this has happened twice. And so I'm out in Idaho and I'm doing great gray owl survey. And so I'm up in the mountains and I get a call from John Losey, and he's the primary investigator for the Lost Ladybug Project. And so I'm sitting on top of a mountain in 15 feet of snow, and John and I have a 3-hour phone call, destroying my cell phone battery. And we talk about what could be happening. And we actually came up with a really cool concept that invasive species can have an impact on a population before contact. And I promise you, I was up on a mountaintop. I wasn't drinking. And John Losey, I don't think he's that type of guy. So we just, you know, it's very outside the box. One of the things is that, especially absent a sampling program with some rigor, extirpated species can exist at below detection levels for quite a long time. And, you know, you always hear about, you know, people finding something that, you know, nobody's seen for 50 years or something. So, I mean, you know, we don't give up hope just because we haven't seen it for a while. And then ultimately, if you, this is coming from, oh, geez, the ant person. Oh my God, that I'm drawing a blank.
Would you be talking about James Traeger?
I'm sorry?
Would you be talking about James Traeger?
No, even though he is a fantastic ant person and a wonderful human being.
E.O. Wilson, then.
E.O. Wilson, yes. So in his population biology work, I mean, it's a really simple equation. And it basically says the change in your population equals, you know, your reproductive output plus your immigration minus your emigration. And so when you have an animal like a ladybug that lives at a landscape scale, if your emigration is going into a sink and you're not getting the immigration back, then your R is lessened, your delta N, your population growth, you know, and it just starts a downward cycle. And because these live at such large scales, you know, I think Eastern North America is the land unit that ladybugs are working. Um, and so this was a really interesting paper. It took so many different formats. Sometimes it was all calculus, sometimes it was all coloring book pages. Ultimately, it got rejected everywhere it went. Um, but I like to bring it up because let's say you're interested in someplace like Ladybug Creek. Um, bush honeysuckle is everywhere. And the place to fight it isn't in Ladybug Creek. The place to fight it is outside. I mean, hopefully, you know, rather than, we can be proactive instead of reactive. And we can understand that before these things get to the landscapes that we care about, we can fight them outside. And whether you're dealing with invasive fish, um, mussels, what have you. And so, um, this was kind of a aha moment where it's like, yeah, obviously, but not so much that we got it published. So we're coming down to the end where hopefully I get a whole bunch of questions. Um, hopefully, if nothing else, you've come to think that, like I did, ladybugs are worth your time and are worth studying. If nothing else, just sending a few snaps from your phone to Lost Ladybug Project, they're actually helping document, especially if you go back to the maps and look for those areas of Missouri that are just blank. And I'll send you the whole map set if you like. Um, I mean, there's counties that, as far as we know, there's no ladybugs in them, and I know that's not the case. And we have this rich. Um, I mean, we know more about Missouri ladybugs historically than we do anywhere else in the United States, and of course, we're very poorly sampled. So, you know, I think using the Lost Ladybug project and throwing in some photos could be really neat. And again, I really think citizen science is important for documenting, current occurrences and distribution. And that's whether you want to use, like I know Phil's here, and I know that both he and I have used Pomona. Both he and I have used the Mississippi State Moth Photographers Group, I would assume. There's Bug Guide, I mean, whatever it is, document, because these, a big part of conservation is knowing what is and what was. And that documentation just makes so much difference, and especially when I'm talking to a nature study group. I mean, you guys are bomb. You're out there all the time, and if you can add documentation of just a few species, that's huge. And then I've started taking to just sending notes to land managers and saying, hey, saw this species on the land you manage. I know it goes in a file someplace and nobody looks at it, but at least it's in a file someplace where somebody can make use of it sometime. So with all that being said, I really want to thank you. Here's my email address. It's just my name, Kent Fothergill, spelled with an O, not an A, and it's at mail.com. If I can be of use, I want to be of use. Here's the references. Again, if you want, I'll send you the whole slide deck. I'll send you any paper if you ask for it. Um, you know, I, I I would love it if the Webster Groves Nature Studies Society said, "Hey, let's do something later," and as much as you want to help you. So, any questions? Anything I can?
Hey, Kent, I have a question. So I was interested, I, I don't know, it was just my impression, maybe others had the same impression that, we've had these exotic ladybirds move in, and then there's been a crash of the the native ones, and I just assumed that the two were related. And from what you said, that may not be the case. It looks like the declines really started predating the um, uh, the invasions or the establishment of the exotic species. And I was wondering if you had, has this decline in the native fauna, has that been kind of associated with this larger general decline of insects on a global basis?
This is really interesting, and um, so one of the, so when I put on my cape and tights, I'm part of the UN International Union for the Conservation of Nature, Coast and Allied Conservation Working Group, um, and that is a really, there is this general decline in birds and amphibians, and I mean it doesn't matter what taxa you're looking at. Um, there's this just general decline, and I think it's many different things. I was really shocked when we moved to Idaho that the two-spotted ladybug, like Harmonia, will overwinter in human homes. And so, you know, we moved back to Idaho, and our house had two-spotted ladybugs, and you're just like, oh my gosh, how wonderful is this? Um, and you know, but in the Missouri Boot Hill, I mean, it didn't seem like it didn't seem like the two-spotted ladybug ever spent a lot of time in houses, because I would get phone calls from people because you're working at the research center, and people would say, I have hundreds of these ladybugs, and this has never happened. Um, Similar to how successful, um, house sparrows, starlings in St. Louis, tree sparrows, which is so cool. you know, um, we have so many species that do better because they associate with us well. And definitely the Asian multicolored ladybug does that. Um, but because it's exploiting kind of a novel habitat, um, I mean, it does allow a secure point from which it can emigrate into native habitats and then outcompete just through sheer size and ability to utilize different things. But a specialist can do better. Um, and so drier habitats, it's hypothesized that like the Asian multicolored and the seven spot won't do as well in dry habitats. Um, Idaho's native ladybug fauna is more robust than Missouri's, and where we were living in southern Idaho, they only get 8 inches diameter. So that kind of would hold up to that. But you still see Harmonia, you still see the seven spot. So I mean they're there. Um, yeah, I realize I sound like a politician answering your question. So.
So a follow-up question to that would be, so, we've received guidance about how we can, with the decline of pollinators and what we as citizens can do to help mitigate that decline. Has the IUCN developed, the Coccinelle Working Group developed a set of guidelines that citizens can try to implement to um, help reverse the decline of these endangered species of ladybugs?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The Lost Ladybug Project is actually, so we collected a lot of Idaho C9s, and they had people collecting nine-spotted ladybugs, and they've actually started captive farming and re-releasing nine-spotted ladybugs into the
Oh,
wild.
wow.
You know, maybe that'll work, maybe it won't, but it's something you're trying. If you're buying, like, are you ever responsible for buying insects for greenhouses, Ted?
Oh, yeah.
Do you check and see if the species you order are the species you get?
um, I think on a few occasions I have sent them off to taxonomists to make sure they really were.
Um, you know, and then when you buy ladybugs, you're just buying ladybugs.
Right.
And so, you know, um, buying ladybug larvae or buying ladybugs, like adult ladybugs to release in your garden,
Yeah.
may not be the best practice. I
Right.
think that would be something that I personally wouldn't choose to do. Um, Laying off on insecticides would definitely be a good thing. You know, unfortunately, that also requires that you're aware that the plants you're buying haven't been neonicotinoid treated, um, you know, prior to your buying them. Because, you know, if you have a neonic seed treatment, you might still be expressing neonicotinoids in the plant and the nectar, which would mean that, you know, it also would be in the sap, which would mean it would be in the aphids, which means it could transfer to your ladybug. Um, and then, you know, tolerate a little bit more of a messy yard so that there's some overwintering spots for ladybugs.
Right.
And yeah, I think that would be the recommendations I have. Um, but your point is really good. We should actually come up with a citizen action.
Yeah. It might be an issue of messaging. So the last point that you made was really struck me because, you know, I follow a number of Native Plant Society group pages. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are interested in growing natives and helping pollinators and all that, but they freak out when they see aphids on their plants. And the first thing they want to do is you know, how do I get rid of them? I don't want to use insecticides, do I use soap or what do I do? But they're still getting rid of the food source for ladybugs.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could develop a message targeting native plant societies and their advocates and you know people that are um, avocational native plant growers, you know, a message around that would really help with the ladybugs too.
Well, and it's not just ladybugs. It's parasitic
Right, it's
moth.
everything.
It's lacewings.
It's the
You know,
diversity of nature. Yeah.
yep. And you know, putting a shout out for Mr. Traeger, um, and to ants.
And the ants.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, ants are going to do their best to keep aphids in your garden. But then, what ants give you as a native plant gardener in the way of soil till, soil aeration? I mean, ants do a lot of cool stuff for your native garden.
Yeah, it's the web of life.
Yeah.
So, Kent, and follow just a review I want to make sure of. Was Harmonia, the Asian ladybird beetle, um, introduced from Asia as part of the ladybug trade for, you know, selling to the gardener, or was it carried over with plants that came from Asia?
Even better, we intentionally released it several times into the United States as a biological control.
Have we?
Yes. And so this top paper up here by Chapman and Brow um, actually talks about Brow is this amazing guy who has been blacklighting in Missouri for, not in Missouri, in Louisiana for years, and he found this odd ladybug, and there you go. Uh, so it's
What was it
actually
released
really
for?
funny. Yeah, and it tells the whole story. And then
I mean,
wildly enough,
what species, what plant was it, or what reason was Harmonia axaritis you released to
um,
control what?
orchard, aphids in orchards.
Aphids and orchids.
Yeah, it really likes it. It tends to really like trees, but you'll find it in soybean fields and corn fields. Yeah, it's kind of one of those. You actually have the term is an invasive meltdown. Have you heard this term?
No.
So what happens is if you reunite enough of an ecosystem, so soybeans are native to Asia. Soybeans have the soybean aphid, which is native to Asia. Its overwintering host is buckthorn. So in the upper Midwest, it has its overwintering host already, in the United States. Um, Buckthorn requires a certain earthworm that was brought into the United States, and of course the Asian multicolored ladybug, you know, comes into Minnesota and just says, oh, "I'm home." Here's my aphids, here's my soybeans. The whole table set. And so the success of a um, it provides a greater opportunity for success of an invasive species to have other invasive species from the same area already present. Um, and then, Brow founded a Blacklight, and what I just kind of crazy, I was while I was a grad student at Prescott College, I was doing some demonstrations blacklight, just showing people biodiversity. And one night was so horrible, nothing showed up except for one beetle.
Oh
And that
gosh.
one beetle was the state record Asian multicolored ladybug for Arizona. So if you're going to have one beetle, it might as well be a state record. But
Sure.
um,
So if I go to the bug store down here in downtown Kirkwood
yes, sir.
and would attempt to buy ladybird beetles, what species would I be getting?
It's a really good question because you do have these really large overwintering populations of Hippodamia in the Rocky Mountains, and it's possible someone could go to one of those populations with a shop vac and you know collect very large quantities of the convergent ladybug or Hippodamia convergence, which is a native and would be fine here in Missouri. In fact, part of the Missouri population may end up in the Rockies. I can't argue against it. I believe they live at huge scales. However, large populations of Harmonia overwinter in people's houses. So if you know the right people, you can just go vacuum them out. And
Yeah, you
um,
come to my house and get those.
yeah, and
I
so
guarantee it.
you may be buying the same pest, it's hard to call it a pest because it will eat aphids, but regardless of which one you buy, they're both highly mobile as adults. And so when you release all these adults, they're just going to go away. The best thing is to do as Ted's saying, make it attractive. They'll come. And if they don't come to eat your aphids, you're still going to get parasitic wasps, lacewings. There's other things that'll help you out. But that said, if you mail me some ladybugs, I'll tell you what they are.
Okay.
Or just
Um,
take a picture. It's easier. I've had people just put insects in envelopes and then send them through the mail. It becomes kind of a forensic thing. I'm sure Ted has seen some really bad insect envelopes. Probably from me.
okay, so one final comment I would have is that a few years back, we did uh, a citizen science project on ladybird beetles. I can't remember which prairie we were at. Now, Phil, you might know or remember because I don't. But basically, the kids that were there at the what this was a prairie bio blitz going on by the Missouri Prairie Foundation, and what we did was we set up and we gave all the kids jars and said, "Go collect ladybird beetles." And uh, I don't have right in front of me what the ratios were, but most of them were the two non-natives that you've been talking about. But there were a handful of other ladybird beetles in the collection, of which we sent all the data off to uh, the Ladybird Project, Lost
Oh,
Ladybug
cool.
Project, but never heard from them after we sent it to them. So
Really?
yeah,
See
this
now,
was this was 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even longer, maybe even up to 10 years ago that we did this.
well, I'll get in touch with John and I'll just let him know. Um, you know, so there's a couple things going on. It's expensive to run a website like this, um, but at the same time, when you have that kind of, I mean, getting back in touch with people and letting them know what their data means, you know, that's an important aspect. And so, um, I'll give John the feedback,
Yeah,
and
it was just one time thing that we did. Uh, but if you want, I mean, I can dig the data up again if I had to. If
um,
they don't have it, and they may.
I'll I'll look on their site. It's actually really easy to search for that kind of stuff, and I'll see what I can find.
Okay.
Um, there wasn't like several thousand ladybug photos, but
No, we're talking about 100 to 150 ladybird beetles were collected by the kids.
actually, that's really cool. And with that kind of sampling, it really is this nice slice in time of what was found.
I just, Phil, if you're there, do you happen to remember which year that was we did that?
No, I'm afraid not. Uh,
I'm trying to remember which prairie it was. That would narrow it down real quick.
I remember doing it, but I couldn't tell you what. I wouldn't even have any records of that.
Yeah. I got to look it up now that you've given your talk, Kent. I'll have to look it up and see uh, what it is we found again. If so, I'll probably send you the data.
Cool. And I'll get in touch with John and find out, um, make sure it's there because, again, it's really cool. It's really important,
Okay.
especially coming out of a prairie. I mean, um, those are really important habitats in Missouri.
Yeah, they definitely are.
Hey, Ken, this is Chris.
Yeah.
Hi,
Thanks
Chris.
very much. Really appreciated the presentation. It's cool.
Well,
Um,
I wasn't a beetle guy until I saw your photos.
well, I hadn't seen quercitans until you came to Missouri, so that was absolutely incredible. I will never forget that.
They're cute little guys, aren't they?
They're cool. They are very cool. Hey, Kent, one under 16-year-old did join me while you were presenting, and she was wondering why they call them ladybird or lady beetles. And I thought I would let you take a stab at that and see if it jives with the same story that I have in my mind.
Okay, well, always fun because there's no telling where all this comes from. But um, suppose the way I've heard it is we call them ladybugs because the crimson color, which is so funny because some ladybugs are tan and some are black, but that bright red color um, reminded people of the red robes of the Virgin Mary. And so she's, Our Lady, and therefore they were called ladybugs. And that's what I been told. But I like calling them ladybugs, but you know, the sex ratio is pretty much 50-50. Uh, um, and again, you know, if I go out looking for ladybugs, I'm going ladybugging. I, I just think they're really fun animals, and um, I highly, they're, they're easy to get to know, and fun to do so. So, what's your story, Chris?
So my story has the same basis. So Virgin Mary is what I was understanding, but there was some other bit to that in the background there, something about England and you know how people recognize the benefit that ladybirds brought to you know, I don't know, wheat fields or something in cleaning up aphids, and so they kind of looked at it as something that I think Virgin Mary did for them or something like that. So anyway, I'm sure there's plenty of stories out there.
Well, it's really cool that yours includes gratitude, because that's important. You know, I mean, even the invasive ones still eat aphids. Um,
Yeah.
um, you know, and then there's that whole, like, when you start reading some of the novel ecosystem stuff where you have these hodgepodge ecosystems that are entirely introduced plants and animals, or maybe they include a smattering of natives, but for the most part, it's just this really weird grouping of plants, animals, fungi, and somehow it all hangs together and works. On one hand, it makes me really sad. You know, I'd like to think that Missouri can, you know, be Missouri and not be, you know, Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, and you know, I mean, but on the other hand, uh, you know, at, at least they still somewhat function. Maybe not as well, maybe differently, but
Yeah. Yeah, to some extent, it kind of is what it is. There's if we thought too much about that, we would probably never get up in the morning, maybe. Oh. But hey, one other question, and it's a little bit tangential to what you're talking, you know, for ladybirds in general. But when you've got different situations like iNaturalist and Bug Guide and Lost Lady Beetle Project, those sorts of things that you know, and where we're already recognizing we're trying to gain records, but then we maybe dilute them across different sites where we collect information. Do they oftentimes mine from each other? I just never thought about that until you were talking tonight.
you know, it's really interesting because Lewis Hessler, Kelly Tyndall, who's sitting right here and
Hey,
has
Kelly.
been quiet the whole time. Uh, John Losey, Lewis Hessler, you know, we, you know, obviously when you have John and Lewis in the room, there's a vested interest in Lost Ladybug Project. But we used a lot of bug guide data uh, on one of our papers because it was good data. And, you know, so yeah, they do look at it. Unfortunately, there isn't as much crosstalk and sharing. And like, I haven't used iNaturalist. You know, like with Bug Guide or, you know, Butterflies and Moths in North America or Moth Photographers Group or Lost Ladybug Project, you're having people, um, I, I would assume that there's some sort of loop for the identifications with iNaturalist to make sure that, you know, they're correct or as correct as they can be. I guess, you know, the better it is, the better it is.
Oh yeah, totally get it. And I mean that's going to be something that you know we'll always have to wrestle with. You know, the quality of the data that are entered. But I was just kind of curious. So you were saying, yeah, you looked at Bug Guide as well, but yeah, I just kind of wonder if say the Lost Ladybird Project could swell their their data with information from Bug Guide, for example, to just make it more robust?
Yeah, I think they could. It's funny because I don't understand why. So for a while, Moth Photographers Group and Butterflies and Moths in North America were playing well together, um, and now they're not. And I don't know if that's funding that makes people not good friends. I don't
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
know. But I mean, ultimately, you know, they're all trying to save the world. So, I
Yeah.
mean, they do have that.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris.
And
Yeah, I'm so much in your debt. Thank you.
Yep. Feelings mutual, Kent. Appreciate it.
Kent, how do they commercially collect the ladybugs? Vacuum cleaners?
I think that's the way. I mean, they can be so thick um, that it's really not that hard. And I've even seen where they've made traps for harmonia. Um, so we know that harmonia. So one of the things I didn't talk about is that the adults, while they're very mobile, they're also long-lived. Um, they'll overwinter. And with harmonia, the Asian multicolored ladybug, they actually have shown that it'll live like up to 4 years. Um, and they'll lay pheromone on their overwintering substrate. So it's easier for other multicolored Asian ladybugs to find. And so they've actually created traps, and it would be pretty easy to hit one of those and get thousands of ladybugs.
In the late 90s, when people around here start noticing the Asian ladybugs, I was at a Boy Scout camp in St. Louis County, 20 minutes from St. Louis, on the for spring camporee, and the adults had some classes, and they were in this white or cabin with white siding. And I got there a little bit early for my 2 o'clock meeting. And after the 1 o'clock meeting was over at 1:45, they were swept out probably a quart's worth of ladybugs that had come out during that 1 hour or so. And at the end of our 45 minutes, I think they swept up another pint or so.
Yeah,
I don't see many around here, although Rich says he gets his not that far
Yeah,
from me.
yeah, not far away, but I don't get quarts of them in my house. No, it's, if I look in a windowsill, there'll be a half a dozen in most of the windowsills around the house.
yeah, it's interesting. We now live in where the brown marmorated stink bug is. And, when we lived in Virginia, we'd have a couple in our house every year. Here in DC, we don't see it, but, Maryland is, one of the first places it was. And I guess, to the point that, they're stink bugs. They can make your house not as pleasant.
Would there be a reason why the ladybugs, they come in probably cracks from the outside, why they would come indoors and not go back out the cracks to the outside?
Well, ultimately, that's the plan. Ancestrally, before human habitations, these animals were relying on white cliffs in Asia. So limestone cliffs is what they were overwintering in, and cracks in the cliffs. Homes suit them just fine.
So where did the chimney swifts live before chimneys were invented?
So
Olive trees.
if you live in the Pacific Northwest, you get to watch their the box swift, which is kind of the same animal, but it's the West Coast version. And they're in hollow old growth trees. So yeah, I'm sure back when chestnut trees 18 feet in diameter dominated the eastern landscape, they were probably utilizing that.
I think it was chimney swifts. They didn't know where they migrated to in the winter time until some scientist ran into this native down in South America who had a necklace made up of bird bands, and they gave him a bribe to show him where they found them, and he took them to a hollow tree. I'm trying to remember if he smoked the tree to get the birds to fall or not, or just natural dying.
Well, and those are some teeny tiny bird bands because they don't have much in the way of feed. Yeah.
So Ken, would you describe for me what your job is at the UN?
Oh, I don't work for the UN. I volunteer.
Well, I mean, the IUCN, you participate in something there you were talking about.
Yeah. So I mean, the big thing that the UN does is the red list, and so far it's been a lot of reading. I haven't really like there's Cosinella undecim punctata. I'd like to write a nice conservation account for that animal. It's kind of always been rare in the U.S. and it'd be an interesting thing to kind of nail down what that animal may have done. It's only known from a few specimens. But I live in D.C., so I have access to it. Because we have a pretty good natural history in that.
So I have a question about, is there any regulation to limit the use of these foreign insectivores like the praying mantis that are introduced and the foreign ladybug or ladybird beetles? Are they still freely accessible and
that's a really interesting question, because if you have a quote unquote insect pest, it is illegal to transport those over state lines. However, these aren't insect pests, or not considered pests. It would be really, really interesting. And then, of course, international borders are totally different. And Kelly said an APHIS regulates that. But, they still find, like edible insects coming across borders alive all the time. And so, yeah, really good question, Dan, and I wish I could give you a better answer.
Well, the question is that a lot of the organic farmer types prefer to use something like a ladybird beetle or Chinese praying mantis or whatnot as a organic pest removal agent, but in reality they have so many side effects and they're threatening the native species that there ought to be some regulation limiting the use of those foreign insectivores.
Yeah. You know, you're 100% correct. I mean, you know, especially when you start buying more esoteric animals like parasitic wasps and stuff, it, it becomes less likely that you're going to be getting the actual animal that you've asked for. I mean, these are difficult at best, and so far we haven't really we haven't really held the gardening insect trade up, you know, up to that magnifying glass to look at. I would hope that most organic, you know, if you're organic gardening, I, I would I would hope that you just, yeah, you would have you, you'd care about what you were doing at a deeper level. But your point's valid. Well, I thank you all. Are there any other questions?
Let's see. Lisa,
I'm here.
you're here? Okay.
All right. No other questions? Well, thank you very much, Kent. It was very interesting and cute and enlightening. And as a reward for speaking to us tonight, we are going to give you a year membership to
Whoa.
Webster Groves Nature Study Society, where you will get the email copy of our newsletter, Nature Notes.
Well, thank you so much. That's very generous. You know, thank you very much for your time and attention. And again, I'm very, you know, just get in touch with me. If you didn't catch my email, you can catch it through Richard.
Yes.
Ted has to. I'll help you any way I can to turn you into ladybug chasing.
Nice to see you
I
again,
have
Ken.
been bitten by one.
That's, yeah, I didn't talk about that, but they do bite.
And
Really?
my mother got bit like within the same week, and she said hers drew blood on her.
Yeah, and typically that's the Asian multicolored ladybug. Yeah, Ted deals with tiger beetles, so he deals with a little bit more intense jaws. But yeah, a ladybug, you'll notice it.
Yeah, as many times as I've worked with kids and we played with ladybugs and never got bitten. And then one time I was like, wow, what was that? And oh, that's a ladybug. What the heck?
Yeah,
That was
but
unusual.
it's a different ladybug. Because when you were a kid, you weren't playing with Asian multicolored ladybugs.
I'm talking, I was an adult when it happened.
Exactly. So when you were a kid, you didn't have the harmonia.
Oh, okay, that would make sense.
Why do they seem to grow things that are bigger in Asia? You know, I'm thinking here in terms of the latest invasion in the Pacific Northwest with the killer, what are they? Killer wasps? No.
Yeah,
hornet.
big,
Murder hornets. Murder hornets. Yeah.
Yeah, what is it? Vespa
I hate that name, but they're pretty impressive.
Yeah, that they are.
And then around us, we have snakeheads, which are these Asian predatory fish. You get to be like 5 pounds, and they're really tough on native fish. They can breathe air, so they can, you know, they're just you know, we have all this marshland, and they can travel over land. I mean, in our tidally influenced swamps, they are just very happy.
Hide along the edge and ambush passersby, huh?
Yeah. And I mean, they'll eat mice and stuff too. I mean, they're
Oh, that's
amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
That's just downright cool.
Yeah. And shouldn't be here.
Yeah, they shouldn't. They're South American. But the ones that should be here, the alligators, I'm thinking in terms of them ambushing things, such as a little puppy dog last week.
That was
Owner
quite
had
the
to dive in after it. I bet you he's glad he didn't come up with an alligator the size of the one that was walking across the golf course the week before.
Yeah, I was down in Florida the first time and I went for a run and I heard this sound while I was running. I heard it again and I went, you know, that sounds like a marine mammal. And, you know, so I fight my way through the brush and it's manatees. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's so cool. And I start taking off my, you know, my shoes and I'm taking off my shirt. I'm going to jump in and swim with the manatees. And then I noticed all of the alligators. Yeah. So, yeah, nature study is so cool. But yeah.
That does sound like an exciting moment there. That's for sure.
Thank
What is
you,
it they
Kent.
say?
It was
Look
great to
before
see
you leave.
again.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Said thank you, Kent. It was great to see you again.
Yeah. It was very nice.
Well, thank you. It was an honor to be asked. And yeah, we should keep in better touch then.
Absolutely.
Well, y'all have a good night. Take care.
Okay.
right.
Thank you very much, Kent.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
See you, Kelly.
Bye.
And everybody's slowly leaving.
Bye.
Good night.
Rich, bye-bye. Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you too, Richard. Good to hear from you. And I'm
I'm
glad you
hoping you'll
joined the
be out
meeting.
this way more often in your retirement.
I plan on it.
And
Adrian
I'd love to.
Adrian doesn't want me to come out until unless I sequester myself for about 2 weeks.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the problem.
That's hard
but,
for me to do.
It was fun riding around in the Rocky Mountain Arsenal property. We could do that again.
Oh, I'd love to do that. That's a neat place.
Once the opportunity is appropriate.
Yeah.
I had a couple of questions. I might talk with you at length sometime.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'm available.
Well,
now I'm retired.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I did a lot of work on beavers a few years back.
I do recall that.
And
You've
it
told
never
me
got
many
published.
stories.
It never got published, so I wondered whether I'll take it with me to the grave or figure out a way to enter it into the record. Anyway, we can talk about those things someday.
If you got the money, because that's what the big thing is paying for it, because you no longer have a financial source that would pay for it for you.
It hadn't occurred to me, but I'll think about it.
I'm
You
sure.
might ponder for me how much money we're talking about.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
But it's several $100s, which most families.
Oh, well.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Uh-huh.
and I don't know the journal. You know, it depends on the journal you wanted to put it in.
Yeah, well, or we might. I was wondering something like what Father Sullivan might have done.
Oh, is it big enough that you could write a small book?
It's about just under 100 pages. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good sized book. That's not a small book.
As it is, and it has there's anatomy and there's physiological measurements and there's growth rate comparisons of the tail with regard to the rest of the beaver, and Well, there might even be a little anecdotal chapter, something about my experiences developing an artificial beaver chow and never getting bitten by the beavers, but being butted a couple times when I got too close to them or something. Anyway, we'll talk one of these days when you're here and time is, I mean, while we're riding around doing prairie dogs and
whatever else we
say
can find out
species.
there.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd love to.
Well, say
Say
hi to everybody.
I will.
Okay.
Okay,
And
you
I
take
thank
care.
Mary says hi, and I thank her for setting this all up. All I had to do was sit here and absorb.
Very good.
Yeah, I learned a little bit. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. You too,
I'm gonna
Bob
hit
and
the
Wayne, who are still online here. Oh, Bob just left. So Wayne, you too. I think I'm going to close it down. So
I think you're down to 3 people.
yeah,
But I'm gonna make it 2.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, Rich, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you too.